A lot of people assume that the person helping others must have always had things figured out. But most of us are shaped by our struggles that started long before anyone ever saw the finished version of us. For me, that started early. My father left when I was 4 years old. Not long after that, my mom remarried a good man, but both of them liked to party. Drinking was a regular part of our household, and my sister and I often ended up raising ourselves more than we were being raised. A few years later, I was sent to military school just before my 8th birthday. And when I eventually returned to public school, I wasn't just the new kid, I was the fat new kid. Today, Mark is turning the tables, and he's going to be interviewing me about the experiences that shaped the message behind Rebuild and Fulfill. Welcome back to Rebuild and Fulfill, real conversations about burnout, rebuilding, and becoming stronger than before. I'm Kelsey Dunbar, here with my co-host Marc Rogala. In episode 1, we introduced the message behind this podcast and talked about strength thresholds, those moments when life pushes us to the limits of what we think we can handle. In episode 2, Mark shared his story of addiction and rebuilding his life after hitting rock bottom. Today, we're continuing that conversation, but Mark is going to interview me about some of the experiences that shaped my perspective growing up and how those experiences eventually led to the work that we're doing today.
So last episode, we talked about my story and some of the struggles that I went through, but your story is a huge part of why we're doing the work that we're doing today. So let's start at the beginning, Kelsey, if we can. So you said your father left you when you were 4 years old and your mom remarried shortly after, but the environment was pretty chaotic with a lot of partying and a lot of drinking and so forth. What was life like for you and your sister back then, growing up in that environment?
Yeah, uh, it was interesting. My just to kind of set the stage of the person that my father was and the type of relationship that my parents had at the time of their divorce. So my father had packed up some things and he loaded up his car, and my mother wanted to see where he was going to be living, because if he was going to be taking us for visits and stuff, she wanted to know where he was living. So we're following him on the highway, and I actually do remember this, even at that young of an age. And we were following him on the highway, and he lost us. At the time, we just were like, oh man, we can't find him. Of course, back then, no cell phones, right? So we just eventually turned around and went home. We waited for a little bit to see if he came back to try and see how we weren't following him. Looking back on it now, I just think he didn't want us to know where he was living. I mean, he was just that sure that he was just going to be gone. And it kind of set the stage for how gone in mine and my sister's life he actually was. And so to kind of set the stage on that. Now, when it comes to, quickly getting together with my stepfather, and like I said, good guy. I mean, it's not that we had the greatest relationship. We didn't have a whole lot of a relationship, period. He was an over-the-road truck driver. And so during the week, he'd be on the road. On the weekends, my parents would be partying. When they were home, they would generally be hosting parties. And yeah, alcohol was always around. My sister and I, because my mom was working a couple of jobs to help support us because my father left us in so much debt, there were times that we would sleep at my mom's office on a couch. And there are other times when we got a little bit older that we would just be left on our own. And so it was just basically my sister and I against the world.
Yeah. Yeah, because of that environment, you said that there were times where you and your sister were basically raising yourselves. I mean, how did that feel like as a kid?
I mean, it was tough. I mean, obviously, thinking back on it now, of course, we were lacking a lot of guidance, a lot of nurturing. My mom lived a hard life, and there were times that we would, whether it was raking leaves, shoveling the driveway, cleaning the house, our mom would come home eventually at like 7 o'clock at night and from work, and she'd be so exhausted, and we'd have dinner cooked. And I mean, we're talking, we weren't even 10. I mean, my sister's 2.5 years older than I was. I mean, always is, right? But anyway, and so, we'd make dinner, we'd clean the house, and like, mom, look what we did. And she's like, did you dust? What? So that was the kind of woman that she was. You could almost never satisfy her. She brilliant woman, and when she wasn't so pissed off at the world, she was a great person to be around. She was a social butterfly type, and so we were just constantly seeking her approval. So yeah, it was tough not having parents around, but my sister was my sister, my best friend, my everything. So we took care of each other.
So before your 8th birthday, you were sent to military school, which that's incredibly young to be going to military school. What was that experience like for you?
So I I have fun with the concept that I like to tell people that I'm in a very unique situation where I can say that I've actually held a rifle in my life before I ever held my first baseball bat. So that was it's an interesting claim to fame. So yeah, it was wild. I mean, I had never done anything away from home. I mean, never even like an overnight camp. And then all of a sudden they're dropping me off on a Sunday and saying, we'll see you next week. And so that was pretty wild. I guess maybe it was somewhat good that it happened at a young age in some regards because I guess I didn't realize what I was missing. And because I didn't really have parental units at home to take care of me, it was like, well, I'll miss my sister, but I was already used to missing everybody else. So it was a military school where you would get dropped off on Sunday, get picked up on Friday, and you'd go home for the weekend. When I first went, though, they actually took me to a military camp the summer before to allow me to kind of get used to that. Yeah, I was actually in military camp first. And I loved the military camp because they had you doing so many different activities and stuff. And it actually felt more like camp, but you got to do a little bit of drill instruction and stuff like that, which did kind of set the stage a little better for me for actually being gone in military school all year round. I mean, it was tough. It was no joke. The military camp, like I said, was kind of like a cruise compared to the military school. In the military school, you had a lot of kids that were there that were from underprivileged homes that had gotten in trouble where they became wards of the state. The wards of the state, then the government was paying for their tuition. You had some kids that their parents had to pay, and then the kids that were there basically on scholarship. But it was a very interesting mix of kids. And so if you weren't involved in a fight with a kid, you were probably involved in a fight with a teacher because your parents signed away all your rights to, corporal punishment. So they could basically whatever they thought necessary to discipline you. Another funny story that I like to tell is that the teachers had, I mean, it was pretty sadistic. The one had a SWAT board that he would put electrical tape around so that when you dropped your drawers and it cracked you on the butt, it'd have a little extra sting to it. Yeah. So that was military school, man. But, it was my first chance to really kind of forge a brotherhood of sorts, because instead of having 110 students, it's in some ways like having 110 brothers. And so in that regard, and also the fact that it made me grow up a lot quicker and see things in the world at a young age that other kids might never experience even as a full adult. I got a lot of experiences out of that, as kind of the saying goes, where we go through the toughest things in life, and if we choose to learn from them, it all makes it worth it. And so I look back on military school and say, yeah, it was tough, but I also think of it fondly. It helped make the person that I am now.
How long were you in that school for, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, so I was there third through sixth grade.
Okay. Okay. And then eventually you left the military school and you returned to the public school system, which is a completely different environment. And when you return to the public school system, nobody remembers you, nobody knew you anymore, and you're walking into a completely new social environment and a completely different environment at that. What was that transition like for you?
Yeah, so at first I was excited about it. I was like, okay, so no more corporal punishment, no being afraid of getting woke up in the middle of the night with a blanket party, is what they used to call it. So when a few guys didn't like something you did, or if you got demerits for your dorm room or for your classroom, and then that would get held against the dorm or the class, and so they would have blanket parties. You get woke up in the middle of the night where they throw a blanket over you and start punching you for getting demerits. So then you would make sure you were dressed right, your footlocker was straight, all that kind of stuff. So not having to go to sleep every night in fear, I mean, that was pretty cool. And so I'm like, okay, I'll just rekindle my old friendships that I had before I left. And so I march into school and I'm like, I'm back. And they're like, who are you? I'm like, you don't remember me? They moved on, obviously. I mean, they were little kids. I mean, they didn't really remember. And as an 11-year-old, I was trying to see the bright side of going back to public school when in reality, I look back on it now and go, man, they should have just left me in military school. But it was actually a financial thing as to why they had to take me out of military school. It was tough. Just trying to, make new friends that I thought were old friends. It was just a very weird situation to be in. And then add to it my having a weight problem and not realizing how mercilessly I was going to get teased for not just being the new kid, but being the fat new kid. So it's like they have double reason to bully me and make me feel less than.
Yeah. I mean, during those years in the public school system, during that transition, what was going on internally for you emotionally? You kind of led to some of that already, but I'm sure there was a lot more going on.
Yeah, I mean, it was just a cavalcade of emotions. I mean, depressed one minute, angry the next, not even knowing where to place that anger. Where I think back on it now, and I probably was more angry with my parents than I was the kids who were bullying me, but certainly they deserved some of my hostility as well. It led to me getting in lots of fights, which now I realize that trying to fight every one of those battles just led to more battles to fight because the kids would enjoy seeing me pop off. And that would just make them want to goat me on even more just to see like, hey, what's he going to do this time? So it was really, really tough.
Yeah. I mean, we know at that age that kids, teenagers, all that stuff could be pretty cruel, you know. I mean, for new kids in general, but on top of that, the fact that you had the weight issue going on, I mean, that just, I'm sure that just added to everything. So looking back now at the younger version of yourself, the kid trying to figure things out without much guidance at all, what do you think that kid actually needed that he wasn't getting?
So the idea of military school is that it's supposed to treat or teach you discipline. It's supposed to hold you accountable. And honestly, my grades were the best that they had ever been in my life when I was in military school. They made you do your homework. You were accountable to good grades. You would drill before every meal so that if you were drilling well, you got to be the first platoon that got to go in to eat breakfast. So you were incentivized. So going back to public school, I had no motivation. I had no incentive. I never had nurturing in my life. I didn't even know what that was like. So just having someone there to support you and to guide you and to hold you accountable is something that every kid should have the benefit of.
Yeah. Do you think that's part of the reason why you spend so much of your life trying to provide the kind of structure and support for other people because you lacked that as a child or a young adult?
100%. I mean, I was meant to do what I'm doing. And I like to tell people, and this is slight segue here, but I like to tell people that in the last few years, I started realizing the difference between a personal trainer and a coach. A personal trainer makes someone work out. Like they come to you, you say, do some of these and some of these, and they watch your form and they say, okay, great job, high five, see you next time. And even though I enjoyed doing that, it wasn't necessarily fulfilling. And once I adopted the mentality of a coach, where a coach is invested in you, a coach cares what you're doing in between the sessions. A coach cares that your mind is right. It's in a good place. Your life is going well. Not just that you're doing good workouts. And that's where I really kind of stepped into thinking about things outside of just the workouts themselves. And when I kind of put on that coaching hat and took off the personal trainer hat. but it was a mind shift for me just to go from one title to the other. A lot of people wouldn't even be able to tell you what the difference is. They'd be like, isn't that kind of the same thing? Or they think of coach as a sports coach rather than as a life coach type thing. So I was definitely meant to do this work, and I was meant to go through everything that I went through so that I can do this work, and so that you and I can do this from a lived life experience mentality. And, you and I have taken several courses, several certifications. We've definitely done our share of learning, but I honestly think that the best thing that we have going for us isn't all those certifications. It's not all the learning. It's the live life experience that makes us relatable to the people that we talk to.
Yeah. I'm going to go rogue a little bit here because we talked about my story last week and now I'm hearing more about your story. And I want to reiterate this for the audience. It's the struggles of life or the harder times of life where it's your greatest opportunity to grow. Like when you went to military school, yeah, that was hard on you, but you learned the benefit of discipline and structure, right? You went back to public schools and you got bullied significantly. But as a result of that, you kind of use that as motivation to completely transform it. Not kind of, you did. Okay. I know there were some internal struggles there because we talked about this quite a bit, you and me, but you use that as motivation to completely transform your life. And as a result of that, you spent 30 years helping people build physical strength or fitness, which I got the ultimate respect for you for doing that and finding the transformation and finding your purpose in life. However, at what point did you start realizing that physical strength alone, when you're working with your clients, wasn't solving the deeper struggles that people are dealing with in everyday life?
Yeah, so it's kind of funny because I spent a couple of years soul searching, well, trial and error, trying to lose weight myself. I mean, at the time that I graduated high school, I was over 300 pounds, and I spent almost every single day in high school waking up, going to the bathroom, standing in front of the mirror, and asking myself, is this the day you kill yourself? That was every day. Most people would go to the bathroom, then they'd stand in front of that mirror, grab a toothbrush, and start brushing their teeth. Not me. So is today the day that I take my life? And each day I felt like I was inching closer and closer, some days more numb than others. Sometimes I was upset. Sometimes I was just numb. And the numb was the scariest part. And that was high school. And after high school, when I finally had my moment where I said, I'm going to just really give it my best try, whatever I can think of to try and get things right. But we didn't have the internet then. I didn't have a coach. I didn't even have parents. So I had no idea what I was supposed to do. My mom used to get Prevention Magazine. I don't even know if that thing even exists anymore, but she had a subscription to it. And in Prevention Magazine, it was just like little chapters of little different health type things. And that's how I started learning about health, wellness, fitness, that sort of thing was from Prevention Magazine, which is probably not the greatest resource for somebody who's trying to figure things out. But I started to eat a little bit better. I started to walk more, walk turned it into jogging, and I was able to lose a significant amount of weight while also doing strength training. So I was putting on muscle at the same time. So I like to say, I think that probably I lost 100 pounds of body fat, but it was 80 pounds of scale weight because I definitely packed on some muscle while I was doing it. And that's when I decided, wow, if I would have known how to do this instead of a couple of years doing this, or instead of spending my entire childhood being overweight, bullied, and hating myself, I could have learned this so much quicker if someone would have reached out to me and said, let me show you how. That's what made me decide to be a fitness trainer so that I could be that person for somebody else. But here was the funny thing, and this goes more to your question, is at the time, I thought that working out and losing weight would my help me feel better. It would help change my brain and change my mindset. Now, after 30 years of being a coach, I realize that if we can help somebody change their mindset first, changing their body is actually so much easier. It took me almost 30 years to figure that out. And it's just something that I think that people don't talk about enough because we all think if we weigh less, we'll look better. If we look better, we'll feel better. So it's like the feeling better is kind of the end product. If we can find some way to make somebody feel better about who they are in that moment instead of criticizing themselves on a daily basis, listening to the noise and just realize I'm a good person. Or as we like to say in our books, you're not broken. All right. We all have things that we can improve on, and there's always time and room for change. So if we can get people to adopt that first, the change itself is going to be so much easier. And that's the kind of work that you and I do now as coaches that for 30 years, I didn't grasp that concept.
Yeah, it's a great answer. When did you begin to understand that strength by itself had to go beyond the physical side?
So, I mean, it was a little bit over time, but I have to say that I have to give you and our relationship and building this suffer to tougher movement, as we like to call it. I mean, it started out as a book, and then we decided we wanted to take it a step further. And so now we call it a movement because we really want to bring this thing forward and bring this out to so many more people and do a lot more work than just the book. And it's been awesome to do that. But in putting that book together and the conversations that we had in the early going about the book, the more that I realized, even though you and I were working with different clients, the kind of people that we like to help, it's two completely different things. Most of the people that would come to me simply because of what I went through myself were people who were looking to lose weight and to feel better about themselves and to feel better physically. Whereas with you, most of the work that you've done has been in the addiction and recovery world. Now, of course, the thing that intersects is the fact that the people that you were dealing with and the people that I were dealing with were all dealing with mental health issues and some depression and anxiety and shame and guilt. And okay, those were all the common denominators. And so therefore, when you and I talked about the type of stuff that we like to tell people to do, the daily habits, the rituals, the framework, it was all the same. And that's why you and I decided to write that book, is because we realized no matter what you're dealing with, if you have a good structure in place to be able to work from, and then we just give you some tips along the way and some accountability, the results are endless. And so that's why we wrote the book. But I'll tell you what, I probably didn't come full circle to realizing how much more important it was to work with someone and their how they feel mentally until you and I started having those conversations. So I'm thankful as well, and we talk all the time about the fact that you and I are constantly learning, constantly involving our own thoughts and opinions and the things that we tell people we're refining, and just we're students of the game. We want to figure out all the best ways until there are new best ways.
Yeah, you know the analogy that I use because people ask us all the time, how long did it take us to write the book? I use the example of a classic rock album because when you go back and listen to bands about how quickly that project came together and they say that album just kind of wrote themselves, well, that's pretty much how the book was. I mean, you're dealing with people that have an addiction, okay, driven by underlying mental health, which is the food or the dietary consumption. I'm dealing with people that are dealing with alcohol and substances, but it's amazing because the solution is the solution, because an addiction is an addiction. And people and the self-medication, whatever your drug of choice is, whether it's eating, whether it's gambling, whether it's scrolling on the phone, shopping, drugs, substances, alcohol, what that is that's self-medication for what's going on inside, and that's what people need to realize when they're listening to this podcast. Obsessive behavior is obsessive behavior. Usually there's something going on inside. So we talked about the book. For someone that's listening right now who feels overwhelmed or stuck because of things they experienced earlier in their life, what would you want them to understand at this particular stage in your life with everything that you've learned?
Yeah, I think it's just important to realize that what you've gone through in the past, or even what you're going through right now, there is a path forward. And we always say progress over perfection. Take one step. You know, whether that's starting the day with a new healthy ritual, start out the day by drinking a big glass of water, make your bed, just start building habits in your life so that you can make changes that will last. And as we also talk about, and I think that eventually we're going to do a whole episode on brain chemicals. I really think that we're going to, that's,
Yeah.
but something that really needs to be done. But I mean, just those little quick wins give you those hits of dopamine. And when you start feeling accomplished, you start trying to figure out what else can I do that can make me feel this accomplished. So it's just the little things. I mean, Mark, your story, you started out on your health journey by just going out and walking. So when you say go for a walk and someone's like, well, I don't have a half an hour. Okay, then go for 10 minutes.
Exactly.
I don't have a gym membership. Do some push-ups, do some sit-ups, do some squats. So start with something that will make you feel like at least you're trying to be better. And then when you start getting better, then the feeling that you get from that will lead to more and more success. So don't think about how much your past is weighting you down, because it's not. It's perspective. People could have the worst possible pasts that they've had to deal with. And you had a rough past, I had a rough past, and yet we've met several people that we go, oh, but it doesn't compare to that, right? We've met those people, right? And
100%.
so everyone can have a worse story. All right. So you can sit around and feel sorry for yourself that you had a rough past, or you could say, but how cool would it be, as rough of a past as I had, if I flipped the script and did something completely unexpected and made a terrific life for myself?
Yeah, no, that's beautifully said. I mean, one thing that stands out about your story that I respect the hell out of you on is that those early struggles didn't break you. I mean, they truly made you, Kelsey. They shaped you how to understand strength and resilience. And I think a lot of people that are listening today can relate to that and, and also learn from that.
Yeah. One of the biggest things I learned over the years is that struggle doesn't automatically break people, but it does shape them. So everything that we dealt with, everything that we had to go through was for a purpose. And that purpose led us to where we are now. So, sometimes the experiences that challenge us are the ones that eventually give us the clarity to help others. And that's certainly what has happened for us. And I really wouldn't have had it any other way. Well, I think that brings us to a close today. So if this conversation resonated with you, make sure to follow Rebuild and Fulfill so you don't miss future episodes. And remember, you're not broken. Sometimes you're just overloaded. And rebuilding is always possible.